If you've been feeling lost recently, this video is for you. Not because I have some incredible advice, not because I figured life out, and definitely not because I found all the answers. The truth is, I've been feeling lost too, and maybe that's exactly why I felt like making this video. Because sometimes the most comforting thing isn't hearing from someone who has all figured it out. Sometimes it's hearing from somebody who's walking through the same fog. Somebody who's trying to make sense of things one day at a time. A few weeks ago, I resigned from my job. If you watch my recent videos, you probably already know that. For a long time, I felt disconnected from myself. Not unhappy all the time, not miserable every single day. Just disconnected, like I was slowly becoming a stranger to myself. And eventually I reached a point where I knew something had to change. So I made a change. I left. I walked away from the stability, the income, the certainty. The life that I had spent last 3 years building. And if I'm being completely honest, part of me thought that decision would bring immediate clarity. I thought that I would wake up the very next morning feeling free, certain, confident, like everything would suddenly make sense. Instead, I found myself sitting with a completely different feeling. Sometimes feeling lost, not in a hopeless way, but in a very real one. And that surprised me, because I think many of us secretly believe that once we finally make the big decision, the confusion disappears. Once we leave the job, once we move countries, once we end relationship, once we start over, then everything becomes clear. But what if that's not how growth works? What if clarity isn't waiting at the finish line? What if clarity is something that slowly reveals itself while we are walking? Lately, I've been thinking about that a lot, because for years I knew exactly what felt wrong. I knew I wasn't living in alignment with myself. I knew my work was taking me further away from who I wanted to become. I knew I was staying mostly because of comfort and security. Make some savings, make my family proud of me that I'm able to be consistent after all. And in a strange way, knowing what was wrong gave me direction, even if it wasn't the direction I wanted. Now that I've removed that part of my life, I'm standing in unfamiliar territory. And unfamiliar territory has a way of making you feel lost. Not because you're going the wrong way, but because you've never been there before. And I think that's something we don't talk about enough. We often speak about transformation as if it's exciting, empowering experience. And sometimes it is, but there is also another side of it. A quieter side, a more uncomfortable side. The part where your old identity starts falling away before your new one has fully formed. The part where you know you have outgrown something, but you don't exactly know yet what comes next. The part where you're no longer who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. And that's where I feel like I'm right now, and maybe some of you are there too. The strange thing is that from the outside, being lost is often viewed as a problem. Something to fix immediately, something to escape, something that shouldn't be happening. People ask me, so what's next? What's your plan? What are you going to do? And those are fair questions, but lately I've realized I don't always have the perfect answer. And I don't need to have them all piled up ready to satisfy the society. And for the first time in my life, I'm not trying to panic because of that. Because maybe feeling lost isn't always a sign that something is wrong. Maybe it's a sign that something is changing. Maybe it's a sign that life is rearranging itself. Maybe it's a sign that you're living a version of yourself that no longer fits. When I look back at some of the biggest changes in my life, almost all of them started with uncertainty. Moving abroad, changing careers, starting over and over in different countries. Becoming a scuba diving instructor, working hospitality, or joining an airline. None of those chapters came with guarantees. None of them arrived with a detailed roadmap. At the time, they all felt uncertain. At times, they even felt frightening. But looking back, uncertainty wasn't the enemy. It was simply the price of entering a new chapter, and yet every time uncertainty appears, I will catch myself thinking something must be wrong. Maybe that's because we are taught to value certainty so much. We are taught that confidence means knowing exactly where you're going. We are taught that successful people will always have a plan. We are taught that if you're unsure, you're somehow behind. But what if it's not true? What if some of the most important moments in life happen when you don't know exactly where you're heading? What if feeling lost is actually evidence that you're exploring new territory? Because think about it. Nobody feels lost while repeating the same routine they've repeated for years. Nobody feels lost while staying exactly where they are. You feel lost when you're moving, when you're questioning, when you're growing beyond the limits of your old life. And growth is rarely comfortable. I think part of my struggle recently has come from expecting certainty too quickly. I left because I wanted alignment, and I'm getting there. I generally feel more aligned today than I did a few months ago. I'm getting closer to myself again. But alignment and certainty aren't the same thing. That's something I'm only beginning to understand. You can feel aligned and still not know where you're going. You can feel aligned and still experience doubt. You can feel aligned and still have a difficult days. The difference is that uncertainty starts serving something meaningful. Instead of feeling trapped by a life that isn't yours, you're navigating a life that is. And I think I would rather face uncertainty in a life that feels authentic than a certainty that in a life that feels disconnected. That doesn't mean it's easy. There are still mornings when I wake up and I wonder whether I made the right decision. There are still moments when fear shows up. There are still moments when I compare myself to people who seem more established, people who seem more certain and like they have everything figured out. But then I remember something. Most of us are only seeing each other's highlights. We are seeing conclusions without witnessing the confusion that came before that. We're seeing outcomes without seeing the years of uncertainty that created them. And because of that, it's easy to assume we are the only ones who feel lost. We're not even close. I think there are millions of people right now sitting in apartments, offices, coffee shops, or bedrooms, quietly asking themselves the same questions. Am I on the right path? What am I doing with my life? Should I keep going? What if I fail? What if I never figured it out? And if that's you, I just want you to know that you're not alone. I don't exactly know how the next chapter unfolds. I don't know how long it will take before things become clear. What do I know is that for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm listening to myself. And maybe that's enough for now. Maybe not every season of life is meant for certainty, and some seasons are meant for exploration, for questioning. And maybe feeling lost isn't an evidence that you've taken a wrong turn, but it's an evidence that you're brave enough to leave the familiar behind. Because the truth is, nobody feels lost while standing. You feel lost when you're venturing into unknown. You feel lost when life is asking you to trust before you can fully see. And while that can be uncomfortable, it can also be incredibly meaningful. So if you've been feeling lost recently, this is simply my reminder that you are not broken. You might just be standing between who you were and who you are becoming. And although that space can feel confusing and lonely sometimes, it might also be one of the most important places you will ever stand. Because sometimes feeling lost isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the beginning.